there's still this chill surrounding Clear Lake City, Texas. Thinking back to June 20th, 2001,
Yeah, a day that just became synonymous with this unimaginable darkness.
5 young children, their lives taken in their own home, in the bathtub,
And the confession came almost immediately from their mother, Andrea Yates, just admitted it.
which led straight to 5 counts of first-degree murder. But that was really just the beginning, wasn't it? The start of this incredibly complex legal and psychological journey.
Exactly. And for our deep dive today, we're primarily looking at the Wikipedia entry for Andrea Yates. It's actually remarkably comprehensive.
It really is. It covers her life, the events, the trials.
Yeah.
Gives you a lot of different angles and details.
It does. It gathers quite a bit of information from various sources, presenting a pretty detailed picture.
So our mission here is to peel back the layers of this case. We want to go beyond just the shocking headlines.
We're trying to understand the why and the how as much as that's even possible in a situation like this.
Looking at the intersection of, severe mental illness, the legal definitions of sanity, societal factors, maybe things that were missed.
And I think listeners might find some surprising details, things that maybe weren't widely reported or get lost over time, hopefully a deeper understanding.
We should acknowledge up front, though, this is obviously a deeply sensitive and disturbing topic.
Absolutely. We want to handle it with care. We invite listeners to join us in this careful exploration.
Think of it as trying to make sense of something that, on the surface, just seems completely senseless.
Right. Trying to understand the human story behind the headlines.
So before everything descended into tragedy, who was Andrea Yates? Before she was that Andrea Yates.
Well, she was born Andrea Pia Kennedy, July 2nd, 1964, in Hallsville, Texas.
Youngest of 5 kids. Her background was German on her mother's side, Irish on her father's.
And there were struggles early on, actually. In her teens, around 17, she dealt with bulimia and reportedly had suicidal thoughts even then.
Wow, okay. But outwardly, she seemed very accomplished.
Very much so. Valedictorian at Milby High School, graduated in '82. Captain of the swim team, National Honor Society officer.
So academically gifted. And she went into nursing.
Yes. Pre-nursing at the University of Houston, then got her nursing degree from the University of Texas School of Nursing. She worked as a registered nurse for quite a while, actually.
Where was that?
At the MD Anderson Cancer Center from 1986 to 1994, a pretty demanding environment.
And then she met Russell Yates, Rusty.
Met him in '89. They got married April 17th, 1993.
And they apparently shared this desire. They wanted a big family.
Yeah, the phrase reported is they wanted as many babies as nature allowed.
And nature, or biology, obliged. 5 children followed.
Noah was born in February '94. Then John, Paul, Luke, and finally Mary, who was born November 30th, 2000.
So a lot of children in a relatively short period. And the family moved around a bit too, changing living situations.
Right. Life seems to have been quite full, maybe stressful, even before the obvious mental health issues surfaced.
And those issues really started to become apparent when
Things seem to have significantly worsened after the birth of their 4th child, Luke. That's when the postpartum depression really hit hard.
and led to her first suicide attempt.
Yes. June 17th, 1999. An overdose of pills. She was hospitalized, prescribed antidepressants.
But that wasn't the end of it. There was another incident soon after.
Shortly after release, yeah. An incident involving a knife holding it to her neck. That led to another hospitalization.
And a change in medication, right. That's when Haldol came into the picture.
Exactly. Haldol, which is an antipsychotic, it's used to treat, conditions where there's a break from reality. This suggests things were escalating beyond just depression.
And the diagnosis became clearer.
By July 1999, after another nervous breakdown and 2 more suicide attempts, the diagnosis was postpartum psychosis.
Psychosis, that's a huge step beyond depression.
A very significant step. And it came with a stark warning from her first psychiatrist, Dr. Eileen Starbranch.
What was the warning?
She explicitly warned Andrea and Rusty against having more children. She stated the risk of future psychotic depression was incredibly high if they did.
A direct warning. But they conceived their 5th child, Mary, just weeks later.
Approximately 7 weeks after Andrea was discharged. It's quite shocking given the warning.
And then the Haldol was stopped.
Discontinued in March 2000. There was a period where she seemed somewhat stable, apparently.
But it didn't last.
No. Her father died on March 12, 2001, and that seemed to trigger a significant decline.
How did that manifest?
She stopped her medication again. There was self-harm, intense, almost obsessive Bible reading, reports of neglecting to feed baby Mary.
Just spiraling downward.
Deeply. It led to another hospitalization under a new psychiatrist, Dr. Mohammed Saeed, on April 1st, 2001. She received treatment, was discharged.
But things still weren't right. There was that incident with the bathtub before the killings.
Yes, May 3rd, 2001. She was found in a near catatonic state, and she had filled the bathtub midday. She later confessed she'd intended to drown the children then, but decided against it.
My God, so the thought was already there.
Clearly. The next day, after a scheduled doctor's visit, she was hospitalized again. The psychiatrist noted the suicide risk, specifically linking it to her filling the tub.
And then just over a month later, June 20th.
June 20th, 2001. Rusty left for work. This was against Dr. Saeed's specific instructions for her to have constant supervision.
He wasn't supposed to leave her alone at all.
No. The plan was for Rusty's mother to arrive an hour later to take over supervision.
But in that 1 hour window.
In that hour, Andrea drowned all 5 children in the family bathtub.
The sequence.
Yeah.
It's just horrific to even recount.
It is. According to her confession, she drowned John, Paul, and Luke first, laid them on her bed. Then she drowned baby Mary, leaving her floating in the tub.
And Noah.
Noah, the oldest, apparently walked in, asked what was wrong with Mary. He tried to run, but she caught him and drowned him too, left him floating.
And then that final detail. Placing Mary in John's arms on the bed. It's just, it speaks to such a disturbed state of mind.
Utterly detached from reality, it seems. Then she called 911.
Repeatedly, right. Just asking for an officer, but not saying why.
Yes. And then she called Rusty and just told him, "You need to come home."
She confessed immediately when police arrived.
Yes. She later told a forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Michael Wellner, that she waited for Rusty to leave because she knew he would stop her. She knew what she was doing was preventable by him.
Which brings us to the legal battles.
Yeah.
The defense argued insanity, obviously. Psychosis.
But Texas law, as we mentioned, uses the M. rules. It wasn't enough to prove she was psychotic. They had to prove she couldn't tell right from wrong at the time she committed the acts.
That's a very high bar.
Extremely high. The first trial, in 2002, the jury found her guilty of capital murder.
But they didn't sentence her to death.
No, they rejected the death penalty. She was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 40 years.
But that conviction didn't stand.
No, it was overturned in 2005. And the reason is, well, it's quite extraordinary.
What happened?
The prosecution's star expert witness, psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz, had given false testimony.
False testimony? About what?
He claimed, under oath, that an episode of the TV show Law and Order had aired shortly before the killings, with a plot line eerily similar to Andrea's case, a woman with postpartum depression drowning her kids and getting acquitted by reason of insanity. He implied this might have given her the idea.
Oh, that episode didn't exist.
It did not exist. A writer for the show, Suzanne O'Malley, who was covering the trial, knew it wasn't true and brought it to light. Dietz later admitted he'd made a mistake.
Wow. That's a major flaw in the prosecution's case.
A huge flaw. It led directly to the conviction being thrown out and a new trial ordered.
So the second trial in 2006, what was the outcome then?
This time, the verdict was different. On July 26, 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
So legally recognized as insane at the time of the killings.
Correct. She was then committed to the North Texas State Hospital Vernon campus, a high-security facility. Interestingly, her roommate for a time was Dina Schlosser, another woman found not guilty by reason of insanity for killing her child.
And later moved to a lower security facility.
Yes. In January 2007, she was transferred to Kerrville State Hospital, where she remains.
What's striking is that the experts, even in the first trial, largely agreed she was severely mentally ill. Right, both prosecution and defense psychiatrists.
Absolutely. There was consensus that she was suffering from a psychotic disorder, likely schizophrenia or severe bipolar disorder with psychotic features, exacerbated by postpartum psychosis.
But the state's argument was purely legal, that despite the illness, she knew drowning her children was wrong.
That was their position. They even tried to float this idea of spousal revenge as a possible motive, maybe anger at Rusty.
Which the defense experts completely refuted based on her mental state.
Yes. They saw no evidence for that. Her delusions were religious and self-condemning, not vengeful towards Rusty in that way.
Let's talk about Rusty Yates' role and perspective. We know Dr. Saeed advised constant supervision.
Yes, but Rusty testified that in the weeks leading up to the drownings, he'd made a conscious decision to leave her alone for short periods.
Why? What was his reasoning?
He apparently thought it would foster her independence, help her get better somehow. He even announced this plan to family members: an hour alone in the morning, an hour in the afternoon.
That sounds incredibly risky. given her state. Didn't anyone object?
Oh, yes. Andrea's brother, Brian Kennedy, later testified that Rusty seemed to have this idea that depressed people just needed a quick kick in the pants.
A fundamental misunderstanding of severe mental illness.
It seems so. And Andrea's mother, Jujita Kennedy, expressed deep concern about Rusty's plan, knowing how unstable Andrea was.
And Dr. Seed apparently didn't know she was being left unsupervised.
According to investigators, Saeed wasn't aware until Rusty called him after the news broke about the drownings.
And Dr. Starbranch, the first psychiatrist, her warning about more children seems critical here.
Absolutely critical. She testified she was shocked they wanted to stop meds to have more kids. Documented the warning, called future psychosis guaranteed. Yet Mary was conceived shortly after.
Rusty, though, later claimed psychiatrists never told him she was psychotic or could harm the children.
He did say that publicly. He stated that if he'd known the risks, they wouldn't have had more children.
But Andrea told her prison psychiatrist a different story.
She did. Dr. Melissa Ferguson testified. Andrea told her she'd mentioned Dr. Starbranch's warning to Rusty, saying she didn't want to have sex because of it.
And Rusty's reaction.
According to Andrea, Rusty dismissed the warning based on their religious beliefs, believing God would see them through, and convinced her she could handle more children.
There's that author, Suzanne O'Malley, again. She noted Rusty seemed to have this persistent sense of unreality about the situation, even after the killings.
Yes, even during the trial, he apparently spoke about hoping Andrea would get better so they could have more children, maybe through surrogacy or adoption. It horrified her family and lawyers. A profound disconnect.
Rusty also placed significant blame on the medical community, particularly Dr. Saeed.
He did. He argued Saeed failed to properly diagnose and treat her psychosis. He was particularly critical of Saeed allegedly refusing to continue the Haldol, which had worked in 1999.
He felt the medical system failed them.
He questioned how she could be so sick and not get the right help, how the family wasn't protected. He also testified he never knew about her visions or thoughts of killing the children, though some records suggest these might have been present earlier.
And he claims Saeed stopped the Haldol due to side effects, even as she got worse.
That was Rusty's testimony. He also claimed Saeed refused to re-hospitalize her or restart Haldol just 2 days before the tragedy.
And the final hospital discharge. Rusty believed insurance played a role.
He suggested she was discharged too soon in May 2001 because their psychiatric hospitalization insurance had a 10-day limit, implying financial pressures influenced medical decisions.
That raises questions about healthcare systems, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Access to adequate, long-term mental health care is a huge issue.
There was also a lot of focus on the antidepressants she was taking, specifically Effexor.
Yes, Rusty and his family felt the high dosage of Effexor, 450 milligrams, prescribed by Dr. Saeed shortly before the killings, significantly contributed to her psychotic break and violence. They called it very over-medicated.
And there was a disagreement about lowering the dose.
Apparently, Dr. Saeed planned to reduce it, but Andrea protested, citing her own research on how difficult Effexor was to taper off.
And was there any medical basis for the concern about Effexor and violence?
Well, Dr. Moira Dolan from the Medical Accountability Network pointed out that by 2005, Effexor's own warning label listed homicidal ideation as a rare adverse event.
And Andrea was on double the recommended maximum dose.
For a month leading up to the killings, yes, 450 milligrams daily. That's a significant point raised by Dolan.
But the defense expert had a different take.
Dr. Lucy Purrier, the defense psychiatrist, argued the antidepressant dosages weren't unusual in clinical practice for severe depression and weren't the cause of the psychosis returning.
What did she attribute it to?
She pointed firmly to the discontinuation of the antipsychotic Haldol about 2 weeks prior. Haldol takes roughly 4 to 6 days to clear the system, so its protective effect would have been gone.
So, conflicting expert opinions, even on the medication's role. It highlights how complex psychopharmacology is.
Very complex. And how difficult it is to pinpoint exact causes when multiple factors are at play.
Another factor that got a lot of media attention was religion. Specifically, this preacher, Michael Warniecki.
Right. Rusty knew him from college. Warniecki sent out these newsletters, The Perilous Times, with very intense fire and brimstone type messages.
And the media suggested this influenced Andrea's delusions. ABC's Chris Cuomo explicitly said her delusions were fueled by Warniecki's extreme religious beliefs.
But both Rusty and Warniecki strongly denied this. Rusty said they weren't close friends and the messages didn't cause the delusions.
And Warniecki's position.
He stated his letters were meant to help their marriage and encourage faith in Jesus, not drive anyone to violence. both called The Media Connection a fiction.
But Andrea's own statements show her delusions had a strong religious component, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Deeply religious, but in a very disturbed way. She told her prison psychiatrist she'd been thinking of killing the children for 2 years.
Why? What was her reasoning in that delusional state?
She believed she was a bad mother, that the children weren't developing properly because of her. She called it the seventh deadly sin.
That they couldn't be saved because of her.
Exactly. My children weren't righteous. They stumbled because I was evil. They were doomed to perish in the fires of hell. She believed killing them was saving them from eternal damnation.
And she mentioned Satan influencing them.
Yes, making them disobedient. It's a chilling insight into the depths of her psychosis.
And after the second trial, what happened with Rusty and Andrea?
Rusty had actually filed for divorce back in August 2004, citing they had been separated since the day of the killings. It was finalized in March 2005.
And he remarried.
Yes, he married Laura Arnold in March 2006. They had a son, but later divorced in 2015.
So, looking back at this whole devastating story, what are the key takeaways?
Well, first and foremost, it's just this tragic, horrific intersection of severe mental illness, specifically postpartum psychosis, and likely underlying schizophrenia and motherhood.
It really highlights the complexities in diagnosing and treating these conditions, which are often misunderstood or missed.
Definitely. And the legal challenges are immense, trying to define and prove insanity under laws like the Manhattan Rules. It's incredibly difficult when dealing with the nuances of the human mind.
You see the ripple effects too, don't you? On the family, obviously destroyed, but also on the medical community, public perception of mental illness.
And all the conflicting perspectives. Blame assigned to the medical system, to Rusty, to Andrea herself, the medication debate. So many unanswered questions remain.
It leaves you wondering, could this have been prevented? If medical intervention had been different, or if the support systems had been stronger.
That's the haunting question, isn't it? What are the broader societal lessons here about recognizing and addressing severe postpartum mental illness? We need better systems, better understanding.
And how does the legal system truly grapple with cases where mental illness isn't just a factor, but the central driving force behind an act?
It raises huge ethical questions, too, about medications, psychiatric care, patient autonomy versus the need for intervention, especially when warnings are ignored.
And the role of external factors like those extreme religious beliefs, even if not Wozniacki directly, or the family dynamics, how much do they contribute to the pressure cooker?
It makes you think about that delicate balance, doesn't it? Between personal responsibility, the overwhelming power of mental illness, and the adequacy of the support available.
What does a case like Andrea Yates ultimately tell us about ourselves? About the human mind's capacity for, well, for everything, for immense love and for absolute despair.
It forces us to confront the darkest possibilities within the human psyche, and perhaps the limits of our current understanding and ability to help those who fall into such depths. A truly sobering thought.